Thank you, Madam President. Good afternoon, through you to the members. I rise in support of the PROTECT Act Plus. I first want to welcome our colleague back to the State House and back to Massachusetts. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your words. Today before us, we have an act promoting the rule of law, oversight, trust, and equal constitutional treatment, otherwise known as the PROTECT Act. And the Senate is going beyond taking measures in front of us here for debate, beyond what the House of Representatives put forward. I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of and thankful for the individuals and advocacy groups that have poured so much hard work into crafting this far-reaching protective actions outlined in the legislation today. As a co-sponsor of the Safe Communities Act for many years, and since I was started in the House of Representatives, I'm very glad to see major pieces of that included in today's proposal. I'm especially thankful to our Black and Latino caucus, as well as our Senate President, Senator Friedman, Senator Miranda, Senator Payano, Senator Gomez, and listening to the inaugural speech of our newest member, Senator Howard, so touched by your words and your lived experiences. Relentlessly, these individuals that I named and the advocacy groups, you know who you are at the foundation of this work, who have relentlessly stood up for what's right. I've appreciated the many conversations that I've had with my colleagues here. And in this body, getting this action right today is of the utmost importance. For some time now, the federal government has been willfully disregarding court orders and constitutional rights of people here in Massachusetts and in other states. Not only are their actions unlawful, but they are harming, displacing, and in some cases even killing individuals in our communities and in communities around the nation. In recent months, I've had conversations with constituents around my district discussing their growing concerns with these actions. Some shared their perspectives quietly in one-on-one conversations. Others spoke very openly in large groups among friends and neighbors at coffee hours. Across those settings, a consistent theme emerged: deep concern, dismay, and fear about what has been occurring with immigration enforcement, and concern and fear about what may lie ahead with ICE and federal government operations and activities, many of which refer to these activities and operations as things that they had never seen before in this country, never thought that they would see in their lifetime again or here. These are things they're speaking of. These are new and growing threats to our liberty, our dignity, and our very democracy. What struck me most in these conversations was the sincerity behind them, with a mix of care for others, a fear for loved ones and for neighbors, and a real uncertainty about what is unfolding in Massachusetts and Minnesota and in other states. But here at home, relevant. We've heard stories today of people that have been detained, deported. What we're watching play out with ICE and federal enforcement is not the future that many of us envisioned nor want for our families or the families of our neighbors or our communities. What we're seeing from this federal administration, this Trump administration now, is contrary to the guiding principles of this nation. I've heard anguish in the voices of friends in Minnesota. I'll never forget calling after Alex Prudy was killed, calling friends in Minnesota, where I worked for several years, more than a decade ago. I wanted to confirm for myself if what I was seeing and hearing in the news and the media was actually real or just hyper-focused on one part of town. And what I heard in their voices was anguish. and they confirmed that it was happening, it was real, and a warning that it could happen in Massachusetts. What we've seen play out over these recent times here in Massachusetts and around the country reminded me of some reflections that I had made a year after the January 6th insurrection in Washington, D.C. I want to thank Secretary Galvin, Secretary of the Commonwealth. Kind of a low-key event that I think got missed by many. The Secretary held an event a year after January 6th at the Old North Church in Boston, where they once again hung lanterns in the steeple. Those lanterns are glowing again. The lanterns in the Old North Church are lit again today. We heard our colleague, Senator Howard, speak of the symbolism of lighting the way with the PROTECT Act today. I'm reminded once again of those lanterns that hung over 250 years ago as the folks that came before us in Massachusetts stood up against tyranny and things that they did not agree with and were wrong. I'm reminded of those lanterns and the collective responsibility that we have to address the threat that faces the Commonwealth and our nation. These are threats that our neighbors face every day, living in fear, and it is our duty to protect them, to protect our freedom, and that freedom from fear. It's our collective responsibility, just as those over 250 years ago looked at those lanterns and heard that call. That's as true then as it is today. As time passes, we will not be judged. We will be judged, not only by today's headlines, but by future generations, our kids, in terms of asking, why did more people not speak up? Well, here in Massachusetts, we do not abide by or believe in these unlawful actions that we're seeing occur here in the Commonwealth or around the country, these dangerous tactics. We choose to stand up for all of our residents, especially those most vulnerable. And we're doing that here today in this debate and ultimately the bill that we will pass, the PROTECT Act. This act puts necessary safeguards in place to protect our immigrant residents and communities, to ensure their well-being, their safety, and their claim to all opportunities that they've come here seeking. Parents should not be fearful to send their kids to school. They should not be fearful to walk their kids to school. Families should be encouraged to seek out the health care services that they need, and there should never be any looming threat of detention of our immigrant residents as they seek legal support. It's heartbreaking to hear the stories of families having to think through and put pen to paper and work with their neighbors and their friends to figure out if they are detained, who will care for their young kids in their absence, an absence which could be forever. I want to provide even greater context because we've heard some mention today of folks that have given up on their American dream and what we're up against with the actions of this administration. Just right down the street, back in December of 2025, there were a number of people that were standing in line, waiting to cross the stage at Faneuil Hall during their naturalization ceremonies, moments away from taking those final steps. The certificates had already been printed. They were going to raise their hand and swear an oath and allegiance to the Constitution and to the United States of America right here down the street from Beacon Hill. And they were pulled out of line, not permitted to go forward with that process, which undoubtedly for most took years. Took taxpayer money to get vetted, to push their paperwork forward. Took personal money to get that process going and see it through to the very end. But these upstanding individuals were stripped of years' worth of effort and high costs and resources because of these reckless practices of the federal administration. They deserve their rightful place among us as U.S. citizens. They've earned it. And these tactics that we're seeing, the fear that folks are living in, are dissuading people that we know today as our neighbors, our co-workers, people in our community, from pursuing that American dream that so many of our grandparents and great-grandparents and so forth came forward with, and are the reasons why we're standing in this body today. So this act before us takes the necessary steps to make sure that these tactics and strategies employed by ICE and Customs and Border Protection, the federal government, has less of a chance of succeeding in Massachusetts in the future. To make sure that we're not only protecting our immigrant population, but taking care of them. That parents are not having to that they may have to make those plans, but not use them in terms of who will care for their child if they are deported or detained. We in Massachusetts must do better than these actions of the federal government. All of our community members deserve the rights, dignity, and principles that this nation was founded on. I'm proud to be a member of this body, the state Senate today, the Massachusetts legislature, as we take up this debate and this proposal before us. I'm proud to be supporting my community and all of yours in this debate, and I hope that we join together and support the passage of the PROTECT Act. Thank you, Madam President.